The cowboy named Flynn Jamison stood at the entrance of the general store in Nevada City, California, watching a woman argue with the shopkeeper about a debt that would change both their lives forever. Though neither knew it yet, as the summer heat of 1872 pressed down on the dusty street outside. Flynn had arrived in town 3 days earlier with nothing but his horse, his worn saddle, and a leather pouch containing $23 that represented the last payment for a cattle drive that nearly killed him. He had no family waiting anywhere, no home to return to, and lately he had been wondering why he kept pushing forward at all. His brother had died 2 years back from fever, his parents were long gone, and the woman he once thought he would marry had chosen a banker from San Francisco instead. At 31 years old, Flynn felt like he had seen too much death and disappointment to believe in much anymore. The woman at the counter had dark hair pulled back in a simple bun, and even from where Flynn stood, he could see the exhaustion in her shoulders, the way she held herself like someone trying to be strong when everything inside was breaking. Her dress was faded blue calico, mended in several places but clean. She could not have been much older than 22 or 23. "Miss Dunbar, I have been patient," the shopkeeper said, his voice tight with irritation. "Your father ran up this debt before he passed, and now it falls to you. $40 is what you owe, and I need payment." "Mr. Howell, I have been working every day," the woman said, and Flynn heard the tremor in her voice that she was trying to control. "I clean houses, I take in washing, I do everything I can, but I can only give you $2 this week." "Please." $2, Howell said with a bitter laugh. "At that rate you will be paying me until you are old and gray. I have a business to run. If you cannot pay, there are other arrangements." Flynn saw the woman stiffen. "What arrangements?" "There is a gentleman who runs the saloon down the street. He is always looking for girls to work there. I could sell your debt to him, and you could work it off in a few months." The woman's hands gripped the edge of the counter. "I will not work in a saloon." "Then you better find another way to get me my money," Howell said. "I am giving you until the end of the week. After that, I am taking this to the sheriff and he will sort it out. You could end up in jail, Miss Dunbar, or worse." Flynn moved without thinking. He walked up to the counter, pulled out his pouch, and counted out $20 in coins and bills. The metal clinked on the wooden surface. "I will buy her debt," he said. Both the shopkeeper and the woman turned to stare at him. Up close, Flynn could see that the woman had green eyes that were wet with unshed tears, and there was a proud tilt to her chin even in her distress. She was lovely in a way that had nothing to do with fancy clothes or careful grooming, something in the honest emotion written on her face. "Who are you?" Howell asked suspiciously. "Flynn Jamison. I just said I will buy her debt. $20 right now." "The debt is $40, Howell said slowly. "And you have been adding interest and fees every week, I would wager," Flynn said. $20 for the original amount her father borrowed, and you walk away with profit today instead of chasing her for months. Take it or leave it." Howell looked at the money, then at Flynn, calculating. $20 and the debt transfers to you. "Whatever arrangement you make with Miss Dunbar is your business." "Wait," the woman said. "I do not understand. Why would you do this?" Flynn looked at her directly for the first time. "Because I was standing here watching and it seemed like you could use some help. We can work out the details outside." Howell was already sweeping the money off the counter. He went to his ledger and scratched out some notes, then wrote up a quick bill of sale that transferred Wilhelmina Dunbar's debt to Flynn Jamison. Flynn signed it, folded the paper, and put it in his pocket. Outside, the sun seemed even brighter. The woman, Wilhelmina, followed him out to the covered walkway and stopped, her arms crossed over her chest. "Why did you do that?" "I already told you." "No, I mean really. Men do not just hand over $20 to strangers. What do you want from me?" Flynn leaned against a support post and studied her. There was fear in her eyes, but also defiance. She was ready to fight him if she needed to. "I do not want anything like what you are thinking," he said. "I saw someone in a bad spot and I had the money to help. That is all. Nobody does something for nothing. Maybe I am not like most people." Flynn pulled out the bill of sale and held it out to her. "Here, tear it up. The debt is gone. You do not owe me anything." Wilhelmina stared at the paper but did not reach for it. "I do not believe you. Why not?" "Because I have learned that men always want something. My father taught me that before he drank himself to death and left me with nothing but debts." Flynn could hear the bitterness in her voice, and something in it resonated with his own disappointments. "Your father sounds like he had some demons." "He did, and they consumed him, and now I am left to pick up the pieces." Wilhelmina finally took the paper from Flynn's hand. She looked down at it, at the written proof of her debt, and then slowly tore it in half. The sound of ripping paper seemed loud in the quiet street. "If this is real, if you truly want nothing from me, then I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything." "I do, though. I have to say something because this is probably the kindest thing anyone has done for me in 2 years." Wilhelmina's voice cracked slightly. "So thank you. Even if I do not understand it, thank you." Flynn pushed off from the post. "You are welcome. Take care of yourself, Miss Dunbar." He started to walk away, heading toward the small boarding house where he had rented a room, but her voice stopped him. "Wait, where are you staying?" "The boarding house on Silver Street." "And how long are you in Nevada City?" Flynn turned back to face her. "I have no particular plans. I was thinking of moving on in a few days, maybe finding work at one of the ranches outside town." Wilhelmina took a few steps toward him. "I know I said you want nothing, and maybe that is true, but I still owe you. Not legally, but morally. I cannot just let you walk away after you spent $20 on me." "You can, actually. That is how this works." "No." Wilhelmina shook her head firmly. "No, I cannot. I may not have much, but I have my pride and my honor. Let me at least make you dinner tonight. I have a small house at the edge of town. It is not much, but I can cook, and it is the least I can do." Flynn considered refusing. He had not done this for any reward, and getting involved with this woman beyond the simple transaction at the store was not part of his vague plan. But then again, he had no plan at all. He had nothing waiting for him anywhere. And there was something about Wilhelmina Dunbar that made him curious, something in her determination not to be defeated even when everything seemed stacked against her. "All right," he said. "Dinner would be nice." The relief on her face was immediate. "Good. Come by around 7. I live in the small white house past the church. You cannot miss it." Flynn watched her walk away, her shoulders a little straighter now than they had been in the store, and he wondered what he had just gotten himself into. He had $3 left to his name, no job, and now he was having dinner with a woman he had just met. It was probably foolish. But lately, Flynn's entire life felt foolish, so what was one more questionable decision? He spent the rest of the day wandering Nevada City, getting a feel for the town. It was a mining town that had seen better days, though there was still enough activity to keep the businesses running. Gold and silver had brought people here in the early days, and some still scratched out a living from the claims in the surrounding hills. Flynn stopped at a saloon for a drink and listened to the conversations around him. He heard about mine accidents, about claim disputes, about the railroad that might be coming through and what that would mean for the town. Nobody talked to him directly, and that was fine. He had never been much for conversation anyway. As 7 approached, Flynn found himself walking toward the church and then past it to where a small white house sat by itself near a creek. It was indeed small, just 2 rooms from the look of it, with a tiny porch and a vegetable garden that showed signs of careful tending. Smoke rose from the chimney, and Flynn could smell something cooking that made his stomach growl. He could not remember the last time he had eaten a home-cooked meal. He knocked on the door, and Wilhelmina opened it almost immediately. She had changed into a different dress, dark green this time, and her hair was loose around her shoulders. She looked younger like this, and Flynn realized she might be even younger than he had first thought, maybe 21 at most. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. "I hope you like chicken stew. It is about all I had to work with." "Chicken stew sounds perfect," Flynn said, removing his hat as he entered. The inside of the house was as modest as the outside, but it was clean and orderly. There was a small table with 2 chairs, a narrow bed in one corner, a fireplace with a pot hanging over it, and a few shelves with dishes and supplies. Everything spoke of someone doing their best with very little. Wilhelmina ladled stew into 2 bowls and set them on the table along with some bread. They sat down, and for a moment there was awkward silence. "I do not usually have company," Wilhelmina said. "I am not sure what to talk about. We do not have to talk if you do not want to." "But that seems rude. You are a guest." She picked up her spoon and then set it down again. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you really buy my debt? And please do not just say you were being helpful. I need to understand." Flynn took a bite of the stew, buying himself time. It was good, better than anything he had made for himself in recent memory. "I am not sure I have a good answer for you. When I saw you at that counter, saw how Howell was treating you, something in me reacted. Maybe because I have been in situations where I felt helpless, and I did not like seeing someone else in that position. Maybe because I have $20 that I was probably going to waste anyway. Maybe because I am tired of only looking out for myself and wanted to do something decent for once." Wilhelmina studied him across the table. "You do not seem like a bad person." "I am not sure what I am anymore, to be honest." "That is a strange thing to say." Flynn met her eyes. "Can I be honest with you, Miss Dunbar? Please call me Wilhelmina or Willa. Most people call me Willa." "All right, Willa. The truth is, I have been drifting for a long time. I have been doing work that pays but does not mean anything, going places but never arriving anywhere. My brother died. My parents are long gone, and the life I thought I would have did not work out. So when I walked into that store today, I had no purpose, no direction. Maybe helping you was just a way to feel like I still mattered, even a little bit." Willa's expression softened. "That is the saddest thing I have heard in a while, and I have heard a lot of sad things." "I did not mean to bring down the mood. No, I am glad you told me. It helps me understand." Willa picked up her spoon again and took a bite of stew. "I know what it is like to feel adrift. When my mother died 5 years ago, my father fell apart. He started drinking more, working less. I tried to hold things together, but I was only 18 and did not know how. We lost our bigger house, moved here, and things just kept getting worse. When he died 6 months ago, I actually felt relieved at first. Is that terrible?" "No," Flynn said. "It sounds human. I thought I would be able to start over, but then I found out about all his debts. Howell was not the only one. I owe money to 3 different people in this town. I have been working myself to exhaustion trying to pay them back, but it never seems like enough. Today, when Howell suggested selling my debt to the saloon owner, I felt like I was at the end of everything. And then some stranger walked in and complicated things." Willa laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her face. "Yes, exactly. You complicated everything because now I do not know if I should be grateful or suspicious or both." "Be grateful," Flynn said. "Life is too short to be suspicious all the time." They continued eating, and the conversation flowed more easily after that. Willa told him about Nevada City, about the people who lived there, about the work she did cleaning houses for the wealthier families. Flynn told her about the cattle drives, about sleeping under the stars, about the small towns he had passed through that all seemed to blur together after a while. When dinner was finished, Flynn helped her clean the dishes and Willa did not protest. They worked side by side in comfortable silence, and Flynn noticed how natural it felt. He could not remember the last time something had felt natural. "Can I ask you one more thing?" Willa said as she dried the last plate. "Of course. You said you might leave in a few days. Does that plan still stand?" Flynn considered. This morning he would have said yes without hesitation. But now, standing in this small kitchen with this woman who had been honest with him in a way few people ever were, he found himself hesitating. "I do not know. Why do you ask?" "Because if you are staying, even for a little while, I would like to see you again. Not because I owe you, but because I enjoyed talking to you. You are the first person in a long time who has made me feel like I am not completely alone in this world." Flynn felt something shift in his chest, something that had been frozen for a long time starting to thaw. "I would like that too." "Good." Willa smiled, and Flynn realized it was the first real smile he had seen from her. "Maybe you could come by tomorrow evening. I could make something else for dinner. Or I could bring something from town and you would not have to cook." "That sounds even better." Flynn left a short while later, walking back toward his boarding house under a sky full of stars. The night air was cool, a relief after the heat of the day, and somewhere in the distance, he could hear music from one of the saloons. For the first time in months, maybe years, Flynn felt something other than emptiness. It was small, just a flicker, but it was there. A reason to stay in Nevada City for another day. A reason to see where this unexpected connection might lead. The next morning, Flynn went looking for work. He could not survive on $3 indefinitely, and if he was staying in town, he needed income. He tried the livery stable first, but they did not need help. The general store, not surprisingly, was not interested. He asked at the saloon, at the hotel, at the mining office. By midday, he was starting to feel discouraged. Finally, a man named Robert Chen, who ran a freight business, said he could use someone to help with deliveries. The pay was not great, but it was steady work, and Flynn took it. He spent the afternoon loading a wagon and making runs to various locations around Nevada City and the surrounding area. The work was physical and straightforward, exactly what he needed. When evening came, Flynn bought some bread, cheese, and apples from the market and headed to Willa's house. She opened the door with that same smile from the night before, and they sat on her small porch eating the simple meal and watching the sun set over the hills. "I found work today," Flynn said. "Freight delivery. It is not glamorous, but it pays. So you are staying, for a while at least." Willa looked pleased. "I am glad. Selfish as it might be, I am glad." "It is not selfish. I am glad too." They talked until dark, and then Flynn walked back to his boarding house feeling lighter than he had in years. This became their routine. Flynn would work during the day, and in the evenings, he would visit Willa. Sometimes he brought food, sometimes she cooked. Sometimes they just sat together talking about everything and nothing. A week passed, then two. Flynn learned that Willa still owed money to two other creditors in town. A man named Sykes, who ran the feed store, and a widow named Edna Peterson, who had loaned Willa's father money for rent. The amounts were smaller than what Howell had claimed, but still significant for someone like Willa who was barely scraping by. "How much do you owe in total?" Flynn asked one evening. To Sykes, $15. To Mrs. Peterson, $10. $25 altogether, which might as well be $1,000 for all my ability to pay it. Flynn thought about his own finances. He was making enough to cover his room and board with a little left over each week. It would take him time to save $25, but it was possible. I could help. Flynn, no, you already did more than enough. I will not let you pay my father's debts. Why not? Because it is not right. These are not your problems. Maybe I want them to be. Willa looked at him in the lamplight, her expression serious. Why? Why do you care so much about helping me? Flynn took a breath. This was the question he had been asking himself for 2 weeks. Because when I am with you, I feel like my life has a point. For the first time in a long time, I wake up wanting to face the day. You make me feel like I matter. Flynn, I know we have only known each other a short time and maybe I am being foolish, but that is the truth. You asked why I care. That is why. Willa reached across the table and took his hand. Her fingers were small and rough from work, but her grip was strong. I feel the same way. These past 2 weeks, you have been the best part of my days. I find myself looking forward to evenings because I know you will be here. But I cannot let you keep rescuing me. I need to stand on my own. What if you do not have to choose? What if you can stand on your own and also let someone help you? Is that how it works? I do not know, but I would like to find out. They sat holding hands across the table, and Flynn felt that flicker in his chest grow stronger. This was not just about helping someone in need anymore. This was about Willa specifically. About the way she laughed at his stories, about her determination to keep going even when everything seemed impossible, about the kindness in her eyes when she looked at him. The next day at work, Flynn asked his employer about taking on extra hours. Robert Chen agreed, and Flynn started working longer days, saving every penny he could. He also started eating less, skipping meals to stretch his money further. Willa noticed. You are losing weight, she said one evening, studying him critically. I am fine. You are working too hard. I can see it. I am saving money. For what? Flynn had not planned to tell her yet, but the concern in her voice made him honest. For your debts. I am going to pay them off. Flynn, I told you not to do that. I know what you told me, but I am doing it anyway because I want to. Because helping you helps me. You understand? Willa stood up from the table, agitated. No, I do not understand. We have known each other for 3 weeks. You have already spent $20 on me. Now you are working yourself to exhaustion and starving yourself to save more money for debts that are not yours. It does not make sense. Flynn stood as well, closing the distance between them. It makes sense to me. Willa, I spent 2 years not caring about anything or anyone, including myself. I was just going through the motions, waiting for something to happen or not happen. And then I saw you in that store and something woke up inside me. I cannot explain it better than that. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you are strong and kind and you do not give up. I know you make me want to be a better person. I know that when I think about leaving Nevada City now, it feels impossible because you are here. Willa's eyes were bright with tears. You are going to make me cry. I do not mean to, I know. That is what makes it worse. She wiped at her eyes. Flynn, what are we doing? What is this? I think, Flynn said slowly, we are falling for each other, or at least I am falling for you, and I hope you feel the same way. I do, Willa whispered. I have been trying not to because it seemed too fast, too impossible, but I do. I think about you constantly. I count the hours until you come by each evening. When you smile at me, it feels like the sun coming out. Flynn reached up and cupped her face gently. Then let me help you. Let me pay those debts so you can start fresh. You can pay me back later if you want, or you can just let it be a gift. Either way, I want to do this. Why? Because you give me a reason to live. The words hung in the air between them, and Flynn realized how true they were. He had been existing, not living, for so long. But Willa had changed that. She had given him purpose, given him something to work towards, someone to care about. She had made his life mean something again. Willa leaned into his touch. "You are either the best man I have ever met or completely crazy. Maybe both." She laughed through her tears. "All right. If you are determined to do this, I will not stop you, but I am paying you back, even if it takes years." "Deal." Flynn pulled her into an embrace, and Willa wrapped her arms around him tightly. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the small house while the lamp flickered, and the night sounds of Nevada City drifted through the window. Over the next month, Flynn worked every hour he could. He took on extra deliveries, helped load and unload shipments at the freight office, and even did some odd jobs around town in his spare time. Slowly, his savings grew. Willa, meanwhile, continued her work cleaning houses, but Flynn noticed she seemed lighter, happier. They spent their evenings together, and their connection deepened. One night, sitting on her porch under the stars, Willa asked, "What did you mean when you said I give you a reason to live?" That sounded serious. Flynn had been hoping she would forget that comment, but he should have known better. "It was serious. Tell me." He gathered his thoughts, trying to find the right words. "After my brother died, I started questioning everything. Why we are here, what the point is of all the struggle. I did not want to die, but I did not particularly want to live either. I was just stuck in the middle, going through the motions. And then I met you, and suddenly I had something to wake up for, someone who needed me and who I needed. You gave me purpose again." Willa was quiet for a moment. "I understand that feeling more than you know. After my father died, I felt the same way. Relieved to be free of his problems, but also completely lost. I had no idea what to do with myself. I was paying off debts because that was the immediate problem, but beyond that, I could not see a future. And then you walked into the general store and changed everything. So we saved each other. I think we did." Flynn reached over and took her hand. They sat like that, fingers intertwined, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. It felt like the most natural thing in the world. By the end of the second month, Flynn had saved enough to pay off Sykes at the feed store. He went there early one morning before work and settled the $15 debt. Sykes seemed surprised but accepted the payment and marked the ledger clear. Flynn took the receipt and brought it to Willa that evening. "One down," he said, handing her the paper. Willa looked at it, then at him, and tears spilled down her cheeks. "Flynn, do not cry. This is good news, I know. These are happy tears." She threw her arms around his neck. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Flynn held her close, breathing in the scent of soap and sunshine that always seemed to cling to her hair. "You are welcome." 3 weeks later, he had enough for the final debt. He went to see Edna Peterson, the widow who had loaned money to Willa's father. She was an older woman with kind eyes who invited Flynn into her parlor. "I heard you paid off Sykes," she said. "You are the cowboy who bought Willa's debt from Howell." "Yes, madam." "Why are you doing all this for her?" Flynn had answered this question in different ways for different people, but to this woman he told the simple truth. "Because I love her." Edna smiled. "That is a good reason. The best reason, really. Here, give me the $10 and I will write you a receipt." They completed the transaction, and as Flynn stood to leave, Edna stopped him. "Take care of her. Willa is a good girl who has had a hard time. She deserves happiness." "I plan to give her that, madam, if she will let me." That evening, Flynn brought both receipts to Willa's house. When she answered the door, he held them out. "You are free. All the debts are paid." Willa took the papers with shaking hands. She looked at them, then at Flynn, and then she started to cry in earnest. Flynn stepped inside and closed the door, pulling her into his arms while she sobbed against his chest. "It is over," she said between sobs. "It is finally over. Yes, it is. I have been carrying this weight for so long, and now it is gone." Flynn stroked her hair. "You can start fresh now." Do whatever you want. Willa pulled back to look at him, her face wet with tears. What I want is you. I want to be with you. You have me. You have had me since the moment I saw you in that store. I love you, Flynn. I should have said it sooner, but I was scared. Scared you would leave. Scared I was feeling too much too fast. But I do not care anymore. I love you. Flynn cupped her face and kissed her, a gentle press of lips that conveyed everything he felt. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you too, Willa. I have loved you for a while now. They spent the rest of the evening talking about the future. For the first time, both of them could imagine one that held promise instead of just more struggle. Flynn talked about saving money to maybe buy a small piece of land, start a ranch or farm. Willa talked about growing her vegetable garden, maybe selling produce at the market. They were modest dreams, but they were theirs. As summer turned to fall in 1872, Flynn and Willa became a fixture in Nevada City. People saw them together at the market, at church on Sundays, walking by the creek in the evenings. There was gossip, of course. Some people thought it was inappropriate for a single woman to be so openly courting, but most folks were happy for Willa. She had been through enough, and Flynn seemed like a decent man who genuinely cared for her. One October evening, Flynn came to Willa's house with a nervous energy she had not seen before. They had eaten dinner, and now they were sitting on the porch as usual, but Flynn seemed distracted. What is wrong? Willa asked. Nothing is wrong. I just have something to ask you, and I am not sure how to do it. Just ask. We have never had trouble talking before. Flynn stood up and pulled Willa to her feet. He took both her hands in his. We have known each other for 5 months now. I know that is not a long time by some standards, but it feels like I have known you my whole life. You changed everything for me, Willa. You made me want to live again, made me believe in the future, and I cannot imagine that future without you in it. Willa's heart started to race. Flynn. Wait, let me finish before I lose my nerve. He took a deep breath. I do not have much to offer. I have a job that pays enough to get by, some savings, and a lot of determination. But what I do have is a heart that is completely yours. So I am asking, Wilhelmina Dunbar, will you marry me? Willa felt tears spring to her eyes for what felt like the 100th time since meeting this man. Yes. Yes, of course I will marry you. Flynn's face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing, and Willa laughed too. When he set her down, he kissed her properly, deeply, and Willa felt like her heart might burst from happiness. I do not have a ring yet, Flynn said, but I will get you one. I do not need a ring, I just need you. You are going to get both. They spent the rest of the evening making plans. They decided to get married in December, giving them 2 months to prepare. It would be a simple ceremony at the church with whoever wanted to attend. Willa would move into Flynn's room at the boarding house temporarily, and they would save money to eventually buy or build their own place. The next 2 months flew by. Flynn worked harder than ever, and Willa continued taking in washing and cleaning houses. She also started sewing her own wedding dress, simple but pretty, made from fabric she bought with money she had saved. The women in town, hearing about the wedding, offered to help. They brought food for the reception, helped Willa with her dress, and donated flowers for the church. Edna Peterson took a particular interest. She invited Willa for tea one afternoon and presented her with a family heirloom, a delicate lace shawl that had belonged to her own mother. For your wedding, Edna said. Something borrowed, as the tradition goes. Willa was overwhelmed. Mrs. Peterson, I cannot accept this. It is too precious. Nonsense. You will wear it and then you will give it back to me after the ceremony, but I want you to have something beautiful for your special day. Thank you. Thank you so much. Edna patted her hand. You and that young man of yours are going to do well, I can see it. You are both fighters, both survivors. That is a good foundation for a marriage. Flynn, meanwhile, saved enough money to buy a simple gold ring from the jeweler in town. It was not fancy, but it was solid and real, and he knew Willa would love it. He also talked to Robert Chen about the possibility of buying a small plot of land outside town. Chen knew of a place, 5 acres with a creek running through it, far enough from Nevada City to feel private but close enough to make the freight runs manageable. The owner was willing to sell for a reasonable price, and Flynn started saving toward it. December arrived with cold winds and the threat of snow. On a Sunday morning, the church was full of people who had come to see Flynn and Willa get married. It was not a large crowd by city standards, but for 2 people who had felt alone in the world just months before, it felt like everyone who mattered was there. Willa walked down the aisle in her simple dress with Edna's shawl draped over her shoulders, and Flynn stood at the altar thinking he had never seen anything more beautiful. His hands were shaking when she reached him, and Willa noticed. "Nervous," she whispered. "Terrified," he admitted. "Me too." But they both smiled, and when the preacher asked if they would take each other as husband and wife, their voices were strong and clear. "I do." Flynn slipped the gold ring onto Willa's finger, and she stared at it like it was the most precious thing in the world. The preacher pronounced them married, and Flynn kissed his wife for the first time, and the small church erupted in applause. The reception was held in the church hall, with food and music and dancing. Flynn and Willa moved through it all in a daze, accepting congratulations and well wishes. Robert Chen pulled Flynn aside at one point. "I talked to the landowner," Chen said. "He is willing to hold that 5-acre plot for you if you can give him a down payment in the next few months." "How much?" $20. Flynn almost laughed at the irony. $20. The same amount he had spent on Willa's debt that first day, the amount that had started everything. "I will have it." "Good. I think you and your wife will do well out there." Later, as the party wound down, Flynn and Willa slipped away to the boarding house. Flynn had paid for a larger room for the night, one with an actual bed instead of just a narrow cot. It was not much, but it was theirs. Inside, Willa removed the borrowed shawl and carefully folded it. Flynn helped her out of her dress, his hands gentle and reverent. This was all new to both of them, and there was awkwardness mixed with the anticipation. But there was also love, deep and real, and that carried them through. Afterward they lay together in the narrow bed, Willa's head on Flynn's chest and his arms wrapped around her. The sounds of Nevada City drifted through the window, voices, laughter, the distant sound of a piano. "Are you happy?" Flynn asked. "Happier than I have ever been." "You?" "Same. I keep thinking about that day in the store. What would have happened if I had walked past, if I had minded my own business? But you did not. You stopped and helped me, and it changed both our lives. Best $20 I ever spent." Willa laughed and tilted her head to kiss him. "Best debt I ever had." They settled into married life with surprising ease. The boarding house was not ideal, but it was temporary. Flynn continued working for the freight company and taking odd jobs, while Willa kept cleaning houses and taking in washing. Every penny they could spare went into their savings for the land. Winter in Nevada City was harsh, with snow and bitter cold, but Flynn and Willa barely noticed. They were too wrapped up in each other, in building their life together. On evenings when Flynn came home from work, they would cook simple meals together and talk about their plans. Willa wanted chickens and a big garden. Flynn wanted to build a barn and maybe get some cattle eventually. They dreamed big and planned carefully, 2 people who had learned that nothing came easy, but everything was possible if you worked for it. By March of 1873, they had saved enough for the down payment on the land. Flynn and Willa rode out to see it with Robert Chen, who acted as the intermediary. The 5 acres were beautiful. Rolling meadow with the creek running along one edge, trees for shade, and a view of the mountains in the distance. The soil looked good for farming, and there was plenty of space for animals. "We will take it," Flynn said, looking at Willa for confirmation. "Yes," she said, her voice full of emotion. "We will take it." The paperwork was completed in town, and suddenly Flynn and Willa were landowners. They stood on their property that evening watching the sun set and held each other tight. "We did it," Willa said. "We actually did it. This is just the beginning. We still have to build a house, get everything set up." "I know, but we will do it together." And they did. Over the spring and summer, with help from Robert Chen and some of the men from town, Flynn built a small cabin on the land. It was not fancy, just 2 rooms with a fireplace and a loft, but it was sturdy and well made. Willa worked alongside him, helping where she could and planning the layout of her garden. By September, they were ready to move out of the boarding house. They loaded their few possessions onto a wagon and made the short journey to their new home. Standing in the doorway of the cabin, looking at the empty space that they would fill with their lives, Flynn pulled Willa close. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For giving me a reason to live. For loving me. For building this life with me." Willa turned in his arms to face him. "You did the same for me. We saved each other, remember?" "I remember." They christened their new home that night, making love in front of the fireplace on a pile of blankets since they had not yet gotten a proper bed. The cabin was drafty and the floor was hard, but neither of them cared. This was theirs. They had built it together from nothing, and that made it perfect. The first year on the land was challenging but rewarding. Flynn continued working for the freight company while also working his own property. Willa planted her garden and tended it carefully, and by fall, they had more vegetables than they could eat. She started selling the surplus at the market in Nevada City, bringing in extra money. They got chickens, just as Willa had wanted, and the fresh eggs were a luxury. Flynn built a proper chicken coop and a small barn. By the following spring, they were able to buy 2 cows, and Willa learned how to make butter and cheese. Life settled into a rhythm. Hard work during the day, quiet evenings together, Sundays at church followed by visits with friends they had made in town. It was not glamorous, but it was theirs, and they were happy. In the summer of 1874, Willa started feeling ill in the mornings. At first, she thought it was something she ate, but when it continued for 2 weeks, she began to suspect. She went to see the doctor in Nevada City, and he confirmed what she had hoped. She was pregnant. Willa wanted to tell Flynn in a special way, so she waited until that evening when he came home from work. She had made his favorite meal, and after they ate, she took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "There is someone else living here now," she said. "Someone who is going to need a bigger cabin in about 6 months. It took Flynn a moment to understand. When he did, his eyes went wide. "You are pregnant?" "Yes." Flynn let out a whoop of joy and picked Willa up, spinning her around just like he had the night he proposed. "We are going to have a baby, we are. I am going to be a father." Flynn set her down gently, suddenly worried. "I do not know how to be a father. And I do not know how to be a mother. We will figure it out together, just like everything else." The pregnancy progressed well. Willa continued working as long as she could, though Flynn insisted she take it easier. He started planning additions to the cabin. Another room for the baby, maybe a larger kitchen. He worked extra hours to save money for the materials and for the doctor's fees when the time came. In February of 1875, on a cold night with snow falling outside, Willa went into labor. Flynn rode to town to fetch the doctor and Edna Peterson, who had offered to help. The labor was long and difficult, and Flynn spent most of it pacing outside the bedroom, terrified. But finally, in the early hours of the morning, he heard a baby's cry, Edna came out with a smile. "You have a son, a healthy baby boy." Flynn felt his knees go weak with relief. "And Willa," exhausted but fine, "she wants to see you." Flynn entered the bedroom where Willa lay in bed, pale and tired but smiling. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. Flynn approached slowly, afraid he might break something. "Come meet your son," Willa said softly. Flynn sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby. He had a wrinkled red face and a surprisingly full head of dark hair. His eyes were closed and his tiny fists were curled against his chest. "He is perfect," Flynn whispered. "He is. What should we name him?" They had discussed names but never settled on anything. Now, looking at his son, Flynn thought about the journey that had brought them here. "What about William? We could call him Will. After me, after both of us. You are Willa, he is Will. It feels right." Willa looked down at the baby. "William Jamison, I like it." Flynn stayed with them all day, holding his son and marveling at the tiny, perfect human he and Willa had created. This was what life was about. Not just surviving, but building something. Creating a family, a home, a future. As baby Will grew, the cabin filled with new sounds. Crying, laughter, the patter of small feet. Flynn added onto the cabin as planned, giving them more space. Willa balanced motherhood with her work, and Flynn continued providing for his growing family. They had hard times, as all families do. There were seasons when money was tight, when the crops failed or the cows got sick. There were sleepless nights with a crying baby, arguments about how to handle various problems, moments of doubt and fear. But through it all, Flynn and Willa held onto each other and the love that had started in a general store in Nevada City. The years passed. Will grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved following his father around the property. In 1877, Willa got pregnant again, and this time they had a daughter. They named her Margaret, calling her Maggie. Flynn doted on his daughter and Will took his role as big brother seriously. By 1880, Flynn and Willa had built something remarkable. Their 5 acres were thriving, with a large garden, chickens, cows, and even a few pigs. Flynn had expanded the cabin twice more, creating a real home with multiple bedrooms and a proper kitchen. The freight business had grown, and Flynn was now a partner with Robert Chen. One evening in late summer, Flynn and Willa sat on their porch watching Will and Maggie play in the yard. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was peaceful and perfect, and Flynn felt a contentment he never could have imagined 8 years ago. "You ever think about that day?" Willa asked, reading his thoughts as she often did. "Which day?" "The day you walked into the general store and spent $20 on a stranger's debt." Flynn smiled. "All the time. Do you regret it?" "Not even for a second. It was the best decision I ever made." Willa took his hand. "You told me once that I gave you a reason to live." "Do you still feel that way?" Flynn looked at his wife, at the children playing in the yard, at the land they had built together. "Every single day. You gave me more than a reason to live. You gave me a life worth living. You did the same for me." They sat together as the stars came out, 2 people who had found each other when they both needed saving. The future stretched ahead of them, full of possibility and promise, built on a foundation of love that had started with a simple act of kindness. Will ran up to the porch, breathless. "Papa, can you come play with us?" Flynn stood up. "Of course." He joined his children in the yard, chasing them around while they shrieked with laughter. Willa watched from the porch, her hand resting on her stomach where a 3rd child grew, though she had not told Flynn yet. She would tell him tomorrow, she decided. Tonight, she just wanted to enjoy this perfect moment. As darkness fell, the Jamison family went inside their cabin. Flynn lit the lamps while Willa got the children ready for bed. They read Will and Maggie a story, tucked them in, and then finally had a moment alone. "I love you," Willa said, standing in Flynn's arms in their bedroom. "I love you too. Always have, always will." They climbed into bed, and Flynn held Willa close, thinking about how different his life could have been. If he had walked past that general store, if he had ignored the woman arguing with the shopkeeper, if he had not had $20 in his pocket. So many small choices that had led to this moment. But he had walked in. He had helped. He had spent that $20. And Willa had given him everything in return: love, purpose, a family, a home, a reason to wake up every morning grateful to be alive. In the years that followed, the Jamison family continued to grow and thrive. Their third child, a boy they named Thomas, was born in the spring of 1881. Flynn and Willa expanded their property, buying another 10 acres adjacent to their original 5. The freight business became even more successful, and eventually Flynn was able to hire help so he could spend more time with his family. Will grew into a strong, capable young man who loved the land as much as his father did. Maggie was bright and curious, always asking questions and wanting to learn. Thomas was the wild one, constantly getting into trouble but with a heart of gold. Flynn and Willa aged together gracefully. Their hair turned gray, their hands became rougher from years of work, but their love never diminished. If anything, it grew deeper with time, the way a river carves through rock, slowly, steadily, permanently. They sat on their porch on summer evenings, watching their children and eventually their grandchildren play in the yard. They told stories about the old days, about Nevada City and the general store and $20 that changed everything. The younger generations listened, understanding that they owed their very existence to a moment of kindness between two strangers who needed each other. Flynn often thought about what he had told Willa that night so many years ago. She had given him a reason to live. It remained true every day of his life. When he woke up next to her, when he worked the land, when he played with his children and grandchildren, he felt the truth of those words. He had been drifting, purposeless, waiting for his life to end or begin. And then Willa had appeared, struggling under the weight of her own burdens, and somehow in helping her, he had saved himself. They had built a life together from nothing, from $20 and hope and love. On their 20th wedding anniversary in December of 1892, Flynn and Willa renewed their vows in the same small church where they had first married. Their children and grandchildren attended, along with friends from Nevada City who had watched their love story unfold over 2 decades. Standing at the altar, holding Willa's hands and looking into her eyes, Flynn spoke from his heart. 20 years ago, I promised to love you and honor you for the rest of my life. That was the easiest promise I ever made because loving you has been the easiest thing I have ever done. You are my heart, my home, my reason for everything. I would spend that $20 again every single day if it meant finding you. Willa smiled through tears. And I would always give you a reason to live. You saved me, Flynn, but I think I saved you too. We saved each other, and we built something beautiful together. I love you more now than I did 20 years ago, and I will love you even more 20 years from now. They kissed while their family applauded, and the celebration that followed was full of joy and laughter. It was a perfect day, a testament to everything they had built together. As they grew older, Flynn and Willa slowed down. They handed more of the daily work to Will, who had taken over most of the farm operations. They spent their days together, taking walks by the creek, sitting on the porch, enjoying the simple pleasure of each other's company. In the spring of 1905, Flynn fell ill. The doctor said it was his heart, worn out from years of hard work. Flynn knew his time was limited, but he was not afraid. He had lived a full life, a good life, surrounded by love. He spent his final days in the cabin he had built, with Willa by his side and his family around him. On a warm May morning, with the windows open and the smell of Willa's garden drifting in on the breeze, Flynn took his wife's hand. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice weak but clear. "For what?" Willa asked, tears streaming down her face. "For everything. For every day, every moment, for giving me a life worth living. You gave me the same gift," Flynn smiled. "I love you, Willa. I will always love you. I love you too. So much." Flynn closed his eyes, still holding his wife's hand, and slipped away peacefully. He was 74 years old and had lived 33 years longer than he thought he would that day in the general store when he first saw Wilhelmina Dunbar. Willa mourned deeply, but not without gratitude. She had been given a love story that most people only dreamed of. Flynn had changed her life in every way that mattered, and she had done the same for him. Their love had created a family, built a home, and left a legacy that would continue for generations. She lived another 8 years, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren who all carried pieces of the love story that had started it all. She told the story often, wanting them to understand where they came from, what foundation their family was built on. In the fall of 1913, Willa passed away peacefully in her sleep. She was 82 years old. Her family buried her next to Flynn on a hillside overlooking the property they had built together. The headstones were simple, but said everything that mattered. Flynn Jamison, 1841–1905. Beloved husband and father Wilhelmina Jamison, 1851–1913. Beloved wife and mother. The story of Flynn and Willa became family legend, passed down through the generations. Their great-great-grandchildren still farmed the land in Nevada City, California, still told the story of how their family began with $20 and a debt, how a cowboy gave a woman her freedom, and she gave him a reason to live. It was a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change everything, that love can bloom in the most unexpected places, that two broken people can come together and create something whole and beautiful and lasting. Flynn and Willa's love story was not fancy or dramatic in the traditional sense. There were no grand gestures or sweeping declarations beyond that first brave moment in the general store. Instead, it was built on everyday choices, choosing each other, choosing to work hard, choosing to love even when things were difficult. But in its simplicity, it was profound. Two people who had given up on life found each other and discovered that life was worth living after all. They built a home, raised a family, and created a legacy that lasted long after they were gone. Their love proved that sometimes all you need is one person who sees you, really sees you, and chooses to stand beside you. Someone who gives you a reason to keep going when everything seems hopeless. Someone who transforms an ordinary life into something extraordinary just by being part of it. Flynn Jamison walked into a general store in Nevada City, California, in the summer of 1872, with nothing but loneliness and $23 to his name. He walked out having spent 20 of those dollars on a stranger's debt, and in doing so, he bought himself a future he never could have imagined. Wilhelmina Dunbar stood at that counter drowning in debts and despair, certain that her life was over before it had really begun. And then a stranger offered her freedom and with it, hope. She took both and gave back everything she had, her love, her loyalty, her whole heart. Together, they proved that redemption is always possible, that love can heal the deepest wounds, and that sometimes the best things in life come from the simplest acts of human kindness. Their story was a testament to the power of choosing love over fear, hope over despair, connection over isolation, and long after they were gone, their family remembered. They remembered the $20, the general store, the cowboy who bought a debt, and the woman who gave him a reason to live. They remembered because it was a story worth remembering, a love worth celebrating, a legacy worth continuing. In the end, that is what mattered most. Not the money or the land or the material things they built, but the love they shared and the family they created. That was Flynn and Willa's true legacy, and it lived on in every generation that came after them, a reminder that love is always worth the risk, always worth the sacrifice, always worth everything.